So on the 24th of July, we have a conjunction between the Sun and Jupiter in the sign of Cancer. This is a very exciting time when the Sun and Jupiter conjoin. There's a sort of a renewal, an expansion of the solar nature of ourselves, of the world, of our lives. Jupiter is the greater benefic. It's associated with things like expansion, wisdom, benevolence. And the Sun represents truly the identity, our identity here, like both individually as human beings, or so to speak, any identity that we create in our lives. So as I sat down to look at the conjunction and talk in the context of the upcoming week, what I ended up finding out, and as I typically do go into rabbit holes, I uncovered that, and I knew this, but I haven't really analyzed that until now. When I decided to do this analysis, I realized that something very interesting happened astrologically related to the Sun and Jupiter conjunction in Cancer. Namely, let me back up to explain this. Jupiter takes about 1 year to move through one sign of the zodiac. That means Jupiter moves about 30 degrees in the span of 1 year. The Sun, on the other hand, moves 1 degree a day. So in the span of 365 days, it will come to the same spot it did 365 days prior. This means that the Sun and Jupiter meet and conjoin every year like a clockwork. What it also means is that every year they meet typically and expectedly in the following sign. So what this ends up looking like is that in the span of 12 years, Jupiter will move through all of the zodiac signs, and every 12 years we'll see a conjunction roughly in the same sign. The degree is never the same. It kind of moves early from the sign or a little later. So that means every 12 years there's a conjunction in a particular sign. Now, what happened 12 years ago, the sign of Cancer got skipped. So there was no conjunction between the Sun and Jupiter in the sign of Cancer. This is an anomaly, and you would expect, because the zodiac wheel is, at least the tropical zodiac wheel that I look at, is comprised of 12 signs. Each sign has 30 degrees. So there's this symmetrical nature that we expect certain things to kind of move through the zodiac circle in the same way. However, the last conjunction between the Sun and Jupiter was in 2002, in July of 2002. In July 2011, there was a conjunction between the Sun and Jupiter in the sign of Gemini, which is the sign preceding Cancer. And then I apologize, in 2012. And then in 2013, we would have expected them to meet in the sign of Cancer, but that didn't happen, and they skipped into Leo. So Cancer was completely skipped. That means this conjunction that is about to happen on June 24th, 2005 has not happened in the sign of Cancer since July 2002. That's a very long time for a conjunction not to happen in a particular sign. So in order to review and possibly discuss what are the possible implications of this occurring, I went back a century, as one does, to see if and when this might have happened in the past. And lo and behold, what I found out is that the same thing happened in 1931. So the sign of Cancer was skipped and there was no conjunction in the sign of Cancer in 1931. So in 1990 was the last time that the Sun and Jupiter in the last century met in the sign of Cancer. I did not go beyond this. Like, sometimes I have to make an executive decision to stop digging in the rabbit hole. So 1919, they met in the sign of Cancer. Great. Then 12 years later, 1931, lo and behold, it skipped. They met in the sign of Leo. So Cancer was skipped. And then from then on, every 12 years, there was a conjunction in the sign of Cancer until it got skipped again in 2013. So let's kind of zoom out and discuss what could this possibly mean. Number one, let's talk about the signification of the Sun and Jupiter. So Jupiter is the greater benefic, is the planet associated with expansion, wisdom, benevolence. Typically, it's a very coveted transit to have. When you have, when we look at a Sun-Jupiter conjunction, it's usually a very benevolent, happy time. Now, there's nuance in everything, but generally speaking, it's a really pleasant transit, mainly because we're talking about the greater benefic that provides expansion in the topics of the other planet that it conjuncts with. In this case, we're talking about the Sun. Now, the Sun is the brightest star in our solar system. The Sun is the Sun, and symbolically speaking, it represents our solar nature. It represents our existence, our ego, and I mean ego in more of a positive, benevolent nature, meaning the identity, the visible identity that we build. So when we talk about that conjoining with Jupiter, you see a sort of expansion in solar qualities of shining and just existing in a level where you're visible and you are expansive, etc. So in the sign of Cancer, now there's 12 signs, and I'm not going to get into that right now. I don't want to make this video too long, but the signs build on each other. It starts from the sign of Aries, and then it ends with the sign of Pisces. And while there's many symbolic meanings for each sign, there's like a general notion when you think about what a particular sign or a particular planet transiting a sign represents. For example, let's talk about it from the perspective of, just briefly, the symbolic meaning of Aries. Aries initiates. It's boldly jumps into action without much forethought. It's a cardinal energy. It's a ignition type of energy that starts a spark of something new. Taurus, the following sign, is an earth sign, and it grounds and stabilizes this initial spark into a tangible reality. So it's a fixed sign. So this really rapid, volatile energy now is getting fixed into by the sign of, or the transit of, Taurus. The next sign sort of starts moving things around. So it's Gemini. Gemini is a mutable sign. It's an air sign. Brings movement, again, moving, curiosity, exchange of ideas. For example, Jupiter is in detriment in the sign of Gemini because it's kind of dispersed and all over the place. Jupiter enjoys in the sign of, is actually domiciled in the sign of Sagittarius, which is opposite of Gemini, where we are looking at things of there's one perspective, and Gemini is about multiple perspectives. But it gets moving. Basically, it moves, takes that energy from the fixedness of Taurus and moves it. Then comes Cancer. Cancer again starts, it's a cardinal sign, also initiates, but it sort of turns it inwards towards nourishing, nurturing, and protecting. It's a water sign, also very rapid, very volatile, but it's more about protection, emotional safety, and nurturing. So when we have the Sun and Jupiter meet in the sign of Cancer, it kind of on global level, it allows these themes of nurturing, protection, emotional safety to be applied in various layers of our existence, so to speak. After that is Leo. So Leo builds on this energy of Cancer. It projects boldly outward energy. It's about embodying individual expression and courage. So Leo is not as much concerned about protection and emotional safety. It's more about standing on a stage and showing bold expression, which is in some way a reaction of the previous sign. It kind of says now, okay, enough with this protective thing. We got to kind of expand and show who we are. Then from there, Virgo refines this energy and starts focusing on a more practical service and detail-oriented care, which Leo is definitely not concerned with. After that, Libra balances the energy from Virgo and harmonizes it through relationships and partnerships. So Libra is much about having different opinions. It's again cardinal energy. There's a lot of movement, but it's also air, so it's very mental, very intellectual, expansive type of energy. After that comes Scorpio. Scorpio sort of says enough of this balancing and other opinions. Let's just kind of anchor deeply into transformation and intensifying of this energy. So it's a water and fixed sign. Scorpio is water and fixed. So it, again, fixes the energy and anchors it in a deep way. Then from there is Sagittarius. Sagittarius seeks truth, higher truth, wisdom, expansion beyond boundaries, and Jupiter, like I mentioned, is at home in the sign of Sagittarius. It's a mutable sign, so it expands, and it also provides this perspective of a lot of truth or higher knowledge, so to speak. After that comes Capricorn. It's an earth and cardinal sign. And it kind of starts grounding it again, says, okay, whoa, enough with this like truth here and there. Let's just anchor this towards discipline, structure, and ambition. Let's just build on this wisdom and build it into something. After that, Aquarius is a fixed energy, fixes this movement that comes from Capricorn. It's a fixed air sign, and it kind of anchors it towards the collective, innovation, societal progress. And then finally, Pisces is a water and mutable sign. It sort of kind of dissolves boundaries and provides universal compassion or spiritual expansion, if you will, and integration. So there is some order in the world, right? So we have all of the planets continuously spinning, transiting these signs. So that's why when we see that there is a conjunction that you would expect to happen in a sign and it skips, it gives you a pause. At least it gave me a pause. So what can this possibly mean? I mean, I'm really open. I would love to have a discussion about this, what people think. So I will post this video on YouTube, and I'll try to post it in other places. And I'm really hoping to hear opinions of what people think. But one thing that jumps at me is there was a sort of disrupted emotional grounding. So, and I'm thinking because obviously none of us were born in the beginning of the last century, so we don't have a personal reference. So this kind of begs us to look at the historical lens of the world at large. So what can this possibly mean? So disrupted emotional grounding would be one of the things. So when you have the Sun and Jupiter not meet in the sign of Cancer, there is that lack of continuation where we go from Gemini, which is Jupiter doesn't necessarily love, it's kind of like expansion of so many ideas and teachings and thought and intellectualizing. And then instead of grounding that energy into the Cancerian realm, we have skip into bold expression, self-expression. And Leo is a fixed sign, it's a fire sign. So you sort of go from air and mutable to fire and fixed. So there's this like Cancer is being bypassed, so there's no thinking about emotional safety, security. There's no nurturing, there's no healing that happens. All of a sudden, just these ideas get kind of ignited and fixed further into this energy of like fixed, bold expression, which is what Leo represents. So there's some sort of missed foundation that happens perhaps when you bypass the sign of Cancer without emotional anchoring. The subsequent bold actions of Leo become a little bit reckless and destructive rather than constructive. And then there's an unresolved collective trauma. Like Cancer is about emotional healing, caregiving. It's trust is being built when you sense that there is care and nurturing. Our trust sensitivity is being nourished. So this sort of builds like cycles of crisis and instability in some way. And then there's like a ripple effect, right? So it just goes on from there. So I was trying to look at the lens of like what happened in the years between 1919 and 1942 and what is happening now in 2002 to 2025. Not a history buff by any stretch of the imagination, but as we all know, 1919 to 1942 was a pretty colorful era with a lot of changes happening in the world. So there was the Great Depression that happened in 1929, so just 10 years after the last Jupiter-Sun conjunction in Cancer. There was the beginning of the Great Depression. That was an economic collapse, banking crisis, and there was this general shattering of trust in institutions. Also, we saw the rise of totalitarianism, Nazi Germany, Stalinist purges, basically nationalism spreading globally, which eventually led to World War II from 1939 to 1945. So it was like a global upheaval, massive human suffering, and the spread of populism. And ultimately, that forced a major structural reset and rebuilding in the world, which is what happened. Now, what are some of the similarities that we could look at in this second gap that happened between 2002 and now 2005? So we got, sure enough, like an echo of that Great Depression. We did not get into a depression, economic depression, but we did get the major 2008 financial crisis, bank failures, economic inequality again. The trust in institution was shattered. We did see quite a few wars get started, geopolitical instability, the war in Iraq, Afghanistan, global terrorism, other conflicts. Basically, there has been a lot of instability in the world. Then we also got the pandemic 2020. It also revealed deep weaknesses in our healthcare and our societal systems. We're still kind of reeling from that. And we've also seen the rise of authoritarianism and polarization again. So nationalism has been rising, fascism has been rising, ideological divisions escalating globally, and here we are. I mean, the news are just ripe with terrible news these days, and I really try to focus on what I can do and what I can make a difference with, but it's really difficult to ignore what's going on out there. So there's like these striking similarities between these two periods. I do think the lack of Cancer's nurturing, healing energy left societies emotionally and structurally vulnerable. It really resulted in widespread breakdowns, the rise in aggressive and defensive ideologies. So what does this mean? I really do think we're in the midst of a great restructuring. And I think regardless of what end of the spectrum you stand on, you do agree that we need some big changes in the world. And we're in the middle of experiencing of those changes. In some way, I do think this is history repeating itself, but in a lot of ways, I like to think that we've learned some lessons and we're doing things a little bit differently this time around. I think it's important to embrace the transformation that's ahead of us. I think, for what it's worth, this is really a truly beautiful conjunction between the Sun and Jupiter. Not just because we haven't had one in over 20 years, but because it's happening right around the same time when a new moon in Cancer is about to happen. So this new moon is going to exact, let's take a look here. It's just a really, really nice, beautiful vibe. And there's a lot of support of this initiatory type of energy. Let's not forget, Cancer is nurturing and nourishing, but it's also a cardinal sign, so it initiates. And so the new moon is literally going to exact on June 25th, Wednesday, so not even a day to 2 days after the Jupiter-Sun conjunction. So this tells me that there's like a huge initiation. This is like a great seeding of a greater change. I think we can all just speculate what those changes are going to look like. I remain, as someone who has Jupiter in Cancer and Sun, so I have this conjunction needle in my chart. So people have accused me of being overly optimistic, and I just can't help it. I do think there is great promise for the years and decades ahead because of what the emotional healing of this conjunction is going to start. I think nothing happens in one day. These cycles move. Jupiter, like I mentioned, moves through one sign in the span of 12 months. So we're going to start seeing what these, like right now it's the seeding, so basically it's the beginning. It's really hard to see what is being started now. We're going to start getting more clarity when the Sun hits Libra and it squares Jupiter. So there's going to be a little bit more of an opening for us to kind of look back and see how this is evolving. And then definitely by a year from now, the world is going to really be, and again, I'm going to say it again, it's a very hardworking energy. So it doesn't talk, it doesn't think, it just works. It creates in the level where Cancer creates in the level of its acting, so to speak. So We've been talking about 2025 being really a pivotal year. And I'm personally very excited that we are here for what it's worth. I know there's like so many changes. Globally, I recommend that you focus less on what's out there. Focus more on what this conjunction is doing in your life, because you have Cancer somewhere in your chart, and that part of your life didn't get that emotional healing and nurturing, nourishing 12 years ago. So there was a bit of a disbalance that got created, and you might have felt it one way or another. And depending what your rising sign is, it kind of expresses itself differently in our lives. So focus on that. Think about the amount of healing that is coming to you now. Think about the amount of wisdom that is being revealed to you so you can heal certain parts of your life, and what that means for your next step, for your next step of your journey, for your next step of your evolution. So that's it. I really wanted to give a week ahead. I ended up looking back a century and forward. So I hope this is helpful, and I am hoping to hear your thoughts. Wishing you the best.